everybody, my name is Maria and I'm here to lecture about knitting and crocheting for Lolita fashion. We are all Lolita workers. And do we have a lot of knitters here? Yes. Excellent. How about crocheters? Excellent. People who do both. Yeah. People who have yet to try. Perhaps. Well, yeah, I hope there's something for all of us, all of you here. I'll have to say that like first, this is my first time lecturing at a convention about any topic, so I'm slightly anxious about this, but I'm certain things are going to go well. There's something for everybody. So a couple of words about who am I, why do I think I know what I'm talking about. So I've been on a bit of on-off Lolita hobbies since 2005, and between 2015 2019 I attended a University of Applied Sciences, so I have a very commercial degree in fashion and clothing. And then happened the pandemonium, and I ended up employed at a yarn shop. So a lot of my experience in why I wanted to start lecturing about knitting is from that point of view, I have the hands-on experience of people approaching me, hey, I want to do this, how do I start? How do I do this? So I wanted to combine that with the Lolita hobby and kind of talk about where to start and where to continue. And I've been quite passionate needlework hobbyist since childhood. I've sewn a lot for Lolita, but in the recent years I also started combining the knitting hobby with it. So why I think knitting for Lolita is an excellent thing to do. Because a lot of this comes from the way I started enjoying the Lolita fashion, which is as a slow fashion. And the garments, they last long, they're taken care of, and in the case of knitting, they also take quite long to make. And so particularly here in Finland, I feel that when Lolita came in here, there was a lot of DIY. We were sharing sewing tips, sewing patterns, so combining with vintage garments. I think a part of that has stayed in, for example, how the brand ethos of, for example, Tampere lady. The idea of slow fashion is strongly present. And if you happen to be a lifestyler and want some Lolita appropriate hobbies, instead of a nice little needlecraft, you can do it. You can have your own Lolita knitting circle, for example, have some tea and go inside and do a bit of knitting. Knitting is also very, very portable. Crochet is also very portable, small project you can take with you anywhere that you can have a small bag. Yes, so knits often turn your coordinate a little bit more casual, in my opinion. Particularly cardigans covering the finest lace and frills of the blouses, and knit legwear also suitable for the colder climates. Here in Finland we love woolen socks, and it's just a personal opinion of mine that, for example, this is a pair of socks that I've knit. This knitwear tends to be a bit chunkier than things that the Lolita brands put out. I feel that the chunkiness makes some person a little bit more casual instead of extremely elegant and refined, but we'll also get to that. So this is an approach that I have for this lecture, that knitting and crochet patterns specifically for Lolita might be few and rare. And if you want to knit something for Lolita, you might need an existing pattern and adjust it somehow. And so knitwear has its own trend cycles, its own microtrends. designs, its own seasons, its own cycles, and that affects what kind of knitwear patterns there are available. What kind of patterns do the knit designers design, and what is easy to find. And here's some, for example, the leftmost picture is from the hobby at Handelsblad in Köln that I attended. It's I think it's for this autumn winter season 25-26. So you see it's for example the sweater, very cropped length. It's very chunky. It's very wide, and the shoulder seam is actually below the hem. So there's a lot of dropped shoulder and chunk. Yes, and this here then is the Icelandic lopapeysa, and they were super popular during the early COVID pandemic. Like they were just gaining in popularity when the pandemic shut things down, and a lot of people took up knitting during the pandemic. And as a result, well, because these kind of sweaters were installed then, we started seeing them everywhere. And these right now kind of a passe in knitwear fashion. At this last hobby at Handelsblad, I did not see any of this anymore. I think people have kind of had their fill of them. But there are some, I have better examples later in the slideshow, but you see the circular yoke, it also does not have much definition in the shoulder. It's also somewhat limiting in how you can move your arms without the garment moving. But the style has a lot of potential for decoration. But here, you have the sleeves, you have the hem. And then also on the topic of accessories that are kind of trending, there are hooded scarves. I think at first there was the Sophie scarf by Petinit. I believe a lot of people have seen it. It's a tiny knit scarf with I-cord edges. They tied on a nice sweetly knot, and that has kind of evolved into a hood, which is then tied under the chin. Yeah, these are the examples of what kind of patterns there might be available and what might not be available. The point being, what is in fashion in the knitwear side of things affects a lot what is available as patterns and what is easy to find as patterns, as well as what kind of materials are used, what kind of colors are easy to find. I believe Jansson employees have the same. They see the same patterns over and over again. When something's trending, people say, hey, I want to make this, I want to make this. So they kind of get this knowledge of this kind of stuff is trending, this kind of stuff is what people are getting the yarns for. Yeah, so here, as I pointed out, some fit aspects of the sweaters in the previous slide. The silhouette of Lolita and the silhouette of the average knit sweater that you might find a pattern for when you start looking for a basic sweater pattern. You see in Lolita the bodice is very fitted and the shoulder seam is kind of where the shoulder actually is. And sleeves, very in poofiness, very in length. Then the waistline is relatively high. And it's at the narrowest point of the body. And then in knitwear, you often find a basic sweater pattern. Like this, it's what we see right now is a lot of dropped shoulder. And the hem of the sweater usually sits at the hip. Of course, there are cropped versions that are already written. The pattern is already written to be a more cropped length. But on average, for example, the amount of yarn that you need to make the sweater takes into account that it's going to land about at the hip. And far as sleeve length and fit goes, this is something that some of my co-workers have had issues with when knitting patterns by popular designers. When they grade the sweater into larger sizes, they do not properly grade the sleeve. So I remember at least one co-worker complaining that this is a triple XL size sweater. Why does it assume I need the same size sleeve as the size medium? So the sleeve fit might be a bit off. Of course, necklines, they vary. So for us, yeah, I didn't say anything about the Lolita silhouette neckline, but those vary. And in Lolita, you very often see at least more daily Lolita where the color, like the Hellocon color, necklines of course vary, but in sweaters, there's some variation, but the neckline of the sweater is often a point where it starts stretching. So I'm stumbling over my words. Okay. Yeah. So the pattern might start with a pattern, might be written with a V-neck or a circular neck, and so combining this kind of sweater with Lolita, it's one thing that I think about for the sweaters and for myself. How is the blouse color going to show? What kind of blouses can I wear under this? And how much of this will be against bare skin? Will I wear short sleeve or long sleeve? Well, point being, the points in the silhouette that you need to take into consideration when choosing a sweater pattern when knitting for Lolita. Here, I have some examples of knitwear that Lolita brands then have put out. Because of course there have been knits in Lolita as long as the fashion has existed. And so some bolivers and cardigans by Angelic Pretty Metamorphose, Innocent World. You see the neckline is quite open, it's rounded, and the length is cropped. And the shoulder seam sits at the top of the shoulder, where the blouse shoulder would also. There's a knit beret from Metamorphose, just as an example, that there are other knits also than just sweaters and cardigans. The socks have a crochet accent on them, so crochet knitting can very well be combined with the cut and sew and sewn garments. This was interesting in my opinion by this point. The fox slipover, or where it might actually be no, it's a slipover. I remember now, it's a slipover with the fox working in Tarsha. And I found this interesting because when I was looking into knits by Lolita brands, I did not see a lot of large images made into the garment like this fox here. And in Tarsha overall in knit fashion, it's kind of thing in the air. Is it going to be the next big thing? Is it going to be the next big thing? But it just never comes back into the knit fashion. So it's an example of possibilities. An example of possibilities. Right. So here's some examples of headwear and accessories. And the only thing here that is actually a ready-made garment by a Lolita brand is the Moonrise Theatre headdress with the crochet hearts. I think here my shadow is not in front of anything. So the other things, this is a Tunisian crochet rose, and it's the same rose that I have made for my head accessory here. There are, particularly for crochet, there are a lot of patterns for like small cute things, flowers of all kinds, seashells, food. Like you can just someone clip on it. You have a head accessory, or you have a hat. Don't have. They are extremely versatile. So you just you find the motifs that you like. You find the motifs that you like to cord, and clip on it. That's how I. That's pretty much how I made these kind of clips, for example. So then this beret, the pattern is by Fran Lopez Knitting, and yes, so the rest of these are things that you can find the patterns for. Fran Lopez, she does very lovely Hawaiian berets. It's an example of a lace beret with a bow. You could easily imagine this in a sweater cord, and by lunar steel, a crochet collar made in a fine crochet thread. An excellent accessory, for example, over a cutso with a more plain neckline when you need something extra great. And this a large collar / small caselet, patterns by Piano Yarns. It's actually a Japanese yarn company. The patterns are available in English, but particularly their knitting patterns sometimes use the Japanese notation, which I find pretty interesting. Yeah, that's also a thing in sourcing patterns. Patterns from different countries, often patterns from different regions, assume a different base skill level. So in Finland, a pattern might really hold your hand from the beginning, how to do all, which custom to use, how many rows, until how many centimeters exactly. This is how you do the turns. And the Japanese patterns tend to assume that you know what you're doing. And they all use the same notation at the base, and they just assume everyone knows it already. So they just repeat the same symbols, and they have a very nice shorthand notation for how many for pattern repeats. So or increases. For example, increase this many stitches, this many rows, this many times. So there's might be a diagram of what the garment is going to look flat when it next with 3 numbers, and you just have to know it's. So I need to increase this many stitches, this many times on this many rows. Unfortunately, I forgot in which order those exactly was. I would have to double check that. But that well, you get the idea. So for sweaters, jackets, shrugs. So I would first start looking for things that are cropped in length, and for this. So the first one here is I believe the designer does very vintage inspired garments. They often have a very subtle, delicate lace pattern to them. You often find them in cropped lengths, and this shirt by Vikingoven has a lovely heart lace motif. This is a pattern that you can actually find for free, at least in Finnish. And this lace pattern is something that one can take and add to, for example, the sleeves of a chunkier sweater. The pattern here is made with a short sleeve. One could easily make it with a longer one. And you see with the shoulder, this particular shirt has a raglan seam. If the visible raglan seam is not your thing, you might find a way to, for example, knit the bodice, knit the sleeves flat, and have a more fitted shoulder. This is an example of a crochet cardigan by Yarnspirations. I believe this is also a free pattern, and particularly in crochet more than knitting, you find creators that are already in the alternative fashion scene, find goths, otherwise alternative wear, and so. More so than knitting. I myself knit much more than I crochet, but I have noticed it as this that in crochet there's a lot more alternative creators, and for example cardigans and dusters. I've seen some magnificent crochet pieces with the flared sleeve. The flared sleeve is much more common in crochet than it is in knitting, and the overall lace. The crochet fabric does. The lace work can be much more open than it is in knitting. So you can find cobweb style dusters, cardigans, boleros, shawls, and then this last image I have here is of the Rauma sweater, which Rauma is a town in Finland very famous for its lace. So this sweater was designed for the town, reminiscent of the lace that it produces. So this is I took this here as an example of how you can decorate a circular yoke. And imagine this in a more crop length with the Lolita skirt. If the lace pattern is all over your shoulders, like a little capelet, could maybe with the sleeves a little bit poofier and have a lovely little lace cuff over here. And maybe the color of your blouse showing over the neckline, or maybe a crochet detachable color over it. And choosing things to make, you also have to think about the colors. So I noticed this at the yarn shop a lot. People get really fall in love with the color that they see in the sample picture. So try to think in different colors. So how would this look in black? How would this look in pink? Would this perhaps in white? Or maybe a dark blue, if that's the thing in your wardrobe. Do not get stuck on the color that you see in the patterns, sample images. Shawls. So now we're getting to OTT territory. Because I think shawls, yes, that's the same shawl in the picture that I'm wearing in the corner. This is it's called the Vernal Equinox. The pattern is free, available online in both Finnish and English. And the shawls, I really think that the lace shawls have a lot of potential in Lolita. It's a lace knit, right? Pardon? Is it lace knit? Yeah, this is knit. This is a cotton. I have. I'm again stumbling over my words with what I was going to say. How I think lace shawls have a lot of potential in Lolita cords, making them up, giving that elegant touch there. Also as accessories, they are lighter than a full cardigan or jacket. So in those in-between seasons when you don't really know, do I need a full coat, do I need a cardigan, or will I be hot, do I need short sleeves? Shawl gives you the just right amount of warmth, easy to take off, easy to put on. But another OTT aspect about them is the time that it takes to make them. This, or the Aeolia that I have here with its 2000 50 or so beads. And one of these is a solid 3 months of knitting when it's the main project that you work on. So it's very time consuming. But I find that spending all the time really, like for me it's just that I kind of wear it a bit differently. Like I put so much work into this, so I want to wear this with love. But then also I put so much work into this, so I want to wear this everywhere that I go, so I can show it off. Also, I was also supposed to show this with the previous slide, which is a shrub made after another pattern by Piero Yarns. So especially Voleva in Finnish, which is a surprisingly simple garment to make. It's knit as a rectangle. The sleeves are sewn together, a bit crochet lace edging for the hem and the sleeves. It's so shrugs like this. I find that they are much simpler to make than what they look. And the lace pattern here is somewhat simple. It's yarn over, knit two together, or knit two together, yarn over. So the elements that make up the knit lace are surprisingly simple. And yes, I wanted to mention, I have one crochet sample here by Red Teapot Atelier, not one that I have made myself. I have another of their shawls in progress right now, but they make wonderful crochet shawls. They are all named after varieties of tea. So I have some designer highlights later in the presentation. For some reason, I had a slide about socks and legwear, but it seems to be missing. Excuse me, I'm just checking. Yeah, it's not there, but it's gone missing. Anyway, so I might talk about socks later on then. But since the PowerPoint went to dresses and skirts, this is not mine. I was very generously borrowed this for the lecture. This is a woolen knit jumper skirt. And I was very generously borrowed this. This is hand knit by a Finnish Lolita from the north, where it's cold, there's a lot of snow, we need to stay warm. And I think this is very generously and geniusly constructed. It's made as it's a combination of patterns. So the body's pattern, so the lace repeat is taken from a book of knitting stitch patterns. I have the book also later on here in the PowerPoint, unless the PowerPoint decides to lose another slide for me. And the skirt part is modified from the pattern of a christening gown, pastemekko. And it just resized into an adult size. And for the hem pattern, a section is simply knit in a different color. But as I mentioned in my PowerPoint, I think knitting dresses and skirts is kind of a danger zone, because they do exist. It's advanced makers testing the limits of what they can do with their craft. And if you don't have a 100% trust in what you are doing, it's very easy to end up with a garment that's a disappointment after hundreds of hours and possibly hundreds of euros in material. Because knit fabric in particular is prone to stretching under its own weight. This is why you should always store your knit garments, knit sweaters, folded flat instead of on a hanger. The neckline, even when you wear it can slowly stretch under its own weight while you wear it. And I've noticed it with a couple of my sweaters. The neckline is slowly larger and larger and larger. And I've also heard of a case of someone getting bamboozled with bamboo yarn, having knit a knee-length dress, and it was floor length by the evening. so it stretches. It also drapes, and a heavy drapey fabric might require a lot from your petticoats, so they don't either give up under the weight, or in case of hoops, possibly show through. And then crochet fabric is a bit of the opposite in terms of drape. Like I'm now thinking of crochet fabric that's made in single crochets or double crochets, so it's somewhat stiff. And this is in a personal opinion that I think it might give a dress or a skirt a bit of a costumey look, because it's something I've seen to some extent people crochet, for example, cosplays, or I've seen very wonderful crochet rococo ensembles entirely in crochet, the dress, the corset, even the wig. So in those cases, the crochet kind of becomes the point rather than the style and the fashion themselves. But do consider, like in this, there was a christening gown used as a base. What I've had in mind rather is using a pattern from a shawl that's a circle or a semicircle, and or possibly a lace doily, and simply increase the base number of repeats. I think those kind of things would have potential in like making lace overskirts. This shawl is a fully into that semicircle, so it doesn't quite fit that. Sort of modeling this, like how would it sit on a dress? Like would need some space for the waist itself, but I think these kind of things have a potential if you specifically wish to make a dress or a skirt. But is it really difficult? I think this is the most difficult thing it is. If you use black yarn, you can't see stitch. For some reason, I've knit several pairs of knee-high or over-the-knee socks and stockings, specifically in black yarn. But when the issue is mainly if you can't see what you're doing, you can't really read your stitches. And reading your stitches, reading your knitting is, in my opinion, the most important thing in advancing your knitting skills, moving from beginner to intermediate to advanced, because it will help you. Okay, so what did I do here? Okay, something went wrong. So what went wrong? So you can read what has gone wrong. You know how to fix it. But yes, these are all skills that can be learned. Everyone starts somewhere. And in this day and age, on the internet, there are copious amounts of tutorials from the very beginning available for both knitting and crochet, also for different styles, whether you are right-handed or left-handed, the English style, continental style. Yes. Then, as I already mentioned earlier, the pieces that I find the best suited for it are, we're looking at the intermediate to advanced difficulty, possibly not beginner. So these are not really beginner patterns, unless you are very adventurous. I mean, nothing is stopping you. Absolutely nothing is stopping you. How to begin? A very short how to begin. So choose your project, or let the project choose you. So you might have an idea. Okay, I want to knit a shrug. I want to knit a cardigan. I could really use a new beret for the winter. So then you find a pattern as a starting point. You choose, okay, what kind of yarn does this pattern use? Do I have the same available at my local yarn store? Is this easy to substitute? What color do I want to make this in? Yes. I heartily recommend, if you're buying a new yarn, one that you haven't used before, that you go to a physical store and feel it for yourself. Because it might be very different to expectations. I noticed this a lot with the Icelandic sweaters, and people who were starting knitting them were like, oh, we've heard this Netlopy is a very good quality yarn, but their assumption of what kind of yarn is good quality, they assume it's probably very soft. No, Icelandic wool is very coarse, it's very rough, it makes outer garments. So a lot of people were taken aback. What do you mean it's not soft? So for those customers who were then more than happy to find a softer alternative that's about the same weight as Netlopy, that will be used for the same pattern, but simply in a softer quality, easier to wear against the skin. Swatching. Swatching is important. So a swatch is essentially a piece of either stockinette or the pattern. If you're going to knit lace or cables, but slightly larger than 10 by 10 centimeters, so you can measure you're getting the right number of stitches. If you're not getting the right number of stitches and you decide to custom the project, if it's a sweater where the size is crucial, you might end up with a way too large garment or a way too small garment. Another good point is watching if there's a lace pattern you've never done before, a cable pattern that looks complex. You can practice that before starting the main project. And importantly, wash the swatch the way you would your finished garment, so you don't have any nasty surprises. Like, for example, you put it in the wash, it comes out felted. Okay, I can't wash anything made with this yarn in the wash after all. Or it's stretched slightly and you get a different amount of stitches per 10 centimeters. You can adjust for that. But okay, when I wash this finished garment, it will grow slightly, so I can knit a smaller garment and get a correct size one after it's finished. Lucky. And also, if the swatch is entirely ruined, well, you just save the rest of your yarn from getting ruined the same way. But if the swatch is all good, okay, everything succeeded, everything came off as expected, you can unravel the swatch and reuse the yarn in your main project. So swatching is particularly important if you are using pricier yarns. So you do not end up with the I spent 200 hours and 200 euros and ended with a disappointment. So sourcing patterns. Where do I find them? I think a big one is Ravelry, and it is a database, somewhat similarly to Library. You can search for patterns by different attributes. What kind of garment is it? What yarn is it for? Is it for very thin yarn or very chunky yarn? Is it lace? Is it made with several strands of yarn together? Is it knit or crochet? There are a lot of filters that you can narrow your search width. It also has a pattern store functionality. Some patterns that are listed are in a physical publication or maybe historical, then out of print, but the pages for them list where, like what publication you need to find to get this pattern. But the designers are also using it as a pattern store. There are a lot of free downloads, there are a lot of paid downloads. It uses solid cable as a payment processor, so there are some geographical restrictions. For example, there was one sock pattern that I looked at for years. Turns out designer is unfortunately Russian, so PayPal doesn't work in their country. They can't process the payment. I can't buy the pattern. And at one point, when the site was redesigned, it started to cause reportedly cause headaches and migraines, possibly even seizures for people looking at the site, which is why I decided not to show a screenshot of the site in case somebody here would be affected by that. So proceed with caution. It's an excellent source of patterns. But yes, it's moderated by humans, and AI-generated patterns are moderated and cleaned away, so you can generally trust what you get on Ravelry when you get a pattern. So designers, some people have their own websites, some use Etsy, and particularly with Etsy, I would recommend if you know a designer, follow their own link, because Etsy does have a pattern of problem with image theft, reposters. Like look at the reviews, just like when buying Lolita on a site that you're not necessarily familiar with, so that you know you're getting the right thing and not a copy. Also, AI-generated scams are somewhat common on Etsy. If the images look too good, too cute to be true, they likely are not. Recognizing AI-generated crochet or knitting, the stitches might change in size inappropriately, melt into each other inappropriately, mixed in strange and inappropriate ways. The texture might flow into a part of the image that's not supposed to be knit or crochet. For example, if there's a garment on a cat, it continues into the cat's hair, its ears. And for amigurumi, AI likes to put all of them in the same room. So you start recognizing the room. Okay, that's the doorway, it's all beige. There's that potted plant. Yep, this is the same AI-generated room that all the AI-generated amigurumi are put in. So yarn stores, yarn brands, they are an excellent source of patterns. Some patterns might be sold in a kit with the yarn and the pattern. Then books, magazines, other publications. The library is an excellent source. In Finland we have a lot of handcraft magazines, pattern books that are widely available from the library. I notice I'm running pretty short on time because the focus sometimes on. Yeah, so if you can't find the perfect pattern, I think I already covered a lot on what things to take note of when you choose the pattern. Just for example, a sweater. I think I'm kind of defaulting to sweaters when I'm thinking of patterns, particularly the shoulder, sleeve, the hem, that they are as close to your desired end result as possible right from the start. And so here's an example of some combinations of patterns. For example, this pair of over-the-knee socks, I found this one pattern with lovely lace cuffs. I just adjusted the stitch count with the cuffs with that pattern. And there's and the main lace pattern is from a different sock. And this is the Japanese knitting stitch Bible, that the pattern for the bodies of these dresses from, I believe, So here are a couple of examples of socks where a knitting stitch like a lace pattern has been simply put on a sock, or it can be easily adapted to, for example, dress bodies, sweater sleeve. Matching yarn to project. I believe this is. I think I might not spend time talking about this because I am running out of time, unfortunately, because I want to get to my designer highlights, and I do not want to skip the designer highlights because they are important. From Lopez knitting, she does her patterns are available in English and Spanish. She says specifically does kawaii inspired patterns. She has some incredibly cute berets. These are just a couple of examples. She also has patterns written for left-handed. And this is Virgin Rosebu's cardigan. I had the cardigan slide, and her patterns are in English. But one reason I wanted to feature her is she also designs for larger sizes. They go up to 5x, where the garment, the bust is 170 centimeters. So her garments are available in a lot of sizes. It's the Red Teapot Atelier that I mentioned. All the patterns are crochet. There are a lot, and I've seen some of these shawls crocheted in a single color, just monochrome white. The textures really pop out, and all that I really like about their designs. All of them are named after tea. So you can make one named after your favorite variety of tea. And this was actually a designer website, hand finished. There are several designers whose patterns are available by that website, specifically Finnish designers. And I picked here examples of a lace and cable sock, the pattern for which is available just as it is over there. I believe they might have the pattern for these socks as well. They are originally from a magazine. The pattern is called Rosita. And this sweater with a lace and wool yoke. I would imagine that maybe adjusted to a slightly shorter length, maybe a slightly different sleeve. It would make a very lovely little garment with these alterations. Questions, comments? Kiitos. Kiitos. Well, thank you everyone for coming to listen to my lecture. I'm really glad to have all of you here.